You so much. It is my oh, we're okay. Thank you so much. It's my privilege to introduce our first guest speaker today, Christina Pollock, licensed clinical professional counselor, currently the director of the Boise Vet Center. She has been at the Boise Vet Center since 2016 as a readjustment counselor and a director since 2019. She served the United States Marine Corps and deployed to Iraq during the invasion in 2003 and again in 2004. She currently lives in Star, Idaho and enjoys outdoors with her family. And today she is here to talk to us about mental health and how mental health specifically impacts women veterans. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. Oh, wow, all the things. Hopefully it works. I'm, of course, learning the things of Zoom. So can you all see that?
Yes. Can you do the presentation display?
Yes. Ish.
So just
hopefully. Oh, little buddy. Yes. Okay, there we go, right?
Solid.
All right. So it was, when I was reached out to speak on this, and I was thinking about mental health impact on veterans, and then specifically women veterans, I was like, oh man, I could talk about this for days. So trying to narrow it down into a smaller presentation was actually took me quite a while because, over the weekend, I'm kind of spinning on like, what's the most important pieces as I speak about women. So some of these we're going to kind of talk about all of these, but I put them down. So if you guys want the PowerPoint, you can always go through them or through the live, the recording. So one of the big impacts of mental health is how do we build policies? How do people get awareness for it? How do we get the folks to the mental health treatment that's important? So recently I've really been kind of proud of how all the organizations are working together, building these organizations to help folks, specifically veterans, get into care. And then our women veterans, really getting them into care and working against those stigmas. So that's kind of where I wanted to lead into. So I know there's a lot going on here, but they were really talking points that I wanted to hit on. And some of the barriers to mental health, specifically for veterans, but mostly for women veterans. And I really appreciated in the history part of y'all's main body about how women have always been we've always been there in, American history of the wars, and we've always been there, but it's kind of like we're always a little bit not quite as equal to. So that is part of the stigma and a lot of the biases that come in and are a barrier for mental health for women veterans specifically. And one of the big biases is our stigma, either one, is all female veterans have MST. And that can be you got to be really careful when you have that belief system, because you'll have a lady veteran come in and she's there for combat PTSD or for something else. And when there's that assumption, you're already behind, and vice versa. So it's very careful in how we approach this. And I think that piece of the mental health is really important. And then the concept of MST in itself, and I'll get to that a little bit down the road, I think, in its definition, is more broad than people think. And that's also a barrier to mental health treatment because of how broad the definition really is, but the stigma or the bias is that it's a narrow focus, and that's really against how it goes. Some of the things to think about when we're accessing care for women veterans specifically is the stereotypes. And you're going to have lady veterans come in and say, well, I'm not worthy, or any of the people we work with, like they're going to come in and say, well, I don't really need mental health treatment. I'm not that bad, or that's not my role. I'm a mom, or I'm a wife, or I'm this and I'm that. And those stereotypical roles can really work against the mental health treatment as we work to get folks into it. So really just being cognizant of that and working with the people to break down those barriers are really important. One of my favorites, and this happens probably weekly, and this is both men and women, but I have a family of a veteran's family come in and say, hey, fix my veteran. I'm like, oh, that's not all their fault. So going back to stigma, stereotypes, and biases is that the veteran is the problem. The veteran is the dysfunction within our family. And that's not true either. And that can cause a real barrier to mental health as well, because we're putting it all on the veteran. There's a bit of that identity of this dysfunctional veteran needs to be fixed in order for us to be happy. And that's expectation versus reality. Not okay. We need, and if you're any kind of organization, and that doesn't mean if you're a therapist or not, anybody who's working with veterans, understanding that that's really not the case. And there's a lot of pieces coming into that. One of the things that I've noticed is a pretty big barrier for mental health for women veterans is access to care. And that's both medical and mental. I feel like a lot of people are doing a lot of good things and we're getting there. One of the things I hear a lot of is childcare. So women veterans are not getting as much mental health or medical care because they got babies, they've got kids, they're shuffling around. And that really goes back into the gender roles sometimes. And so how do we work with them versus against them, I think is really important. And I've had kids in my office. I don't mind. We don't get into the trauma of the pieces, but getting them in, getting them comfortable, help break down those barriers. One of the things I did want to touch on is when we look at men and women and we look at the combat and we look at PTSD and I don't want to say go back to the stereotypical, this is the person who was in combat and this is the person who is not. And the reality is there's really no way to know. We'll never know if a person has been in these shoes or not until they tell us. So don't have the assumption. Yes, men tend to be exposed more, but as we learned in the history, women are there. One of the things I was laughing about is, in 2015, they said that combat roles have changed. And in 2003, when we went to the invasion, they're like, yeah, women can't be on the front lines. You got to sit back here. And that shit did not happen. There was no lines over there. So kind of just knowing that can be a thing for women is they feel like they're less than because of that combat role. And that's not, that sucks. So that's one of the things in mental health we work against and help them understand they're just as worthy. With MST, unfortunately, yes, women are predominantly the ones that MST is against. There are a lot of men, but it's very underreported. So I think the numbers are very skewed. But one of the things that I thought was insane and makes complex trauma and working with women veterans in the mental health world very complicated is that there's MST while on combat deployments. And holy cannolis, is that really hard to tease that stuff out and really help them move forward to live a good life. So that's very hard. Some of these things are very similar, but one of the things that makes me a little crazy is there is a lot of overdiagnosing of borderline personality disorder for women veterans. And I feel like that's a huge disservice to women veterans in the mental health world, because in our 20s, most of us look borderline. There's a lot of things we don't do well in our 20s, right? Right. We're learning a lot of things. So I really wish that they would wait to diagnose borderline for women veterans until maybe mid-30s when they've stabled out, they've learned their identity. But there is an assumption that women veterans are going to have borderline personality. And reality is probably not. I'm going to say that the percentage is very different than what is diagnosed. And that's Christina's opinion, but one of the other things to think about when we look at mental health for women veterans is, and I'm going to click to the next page because it correlates, and I'm trying to be quick, this comes from a childhood trauma analysis. And I really like this picture because it really shows that early childhood development really matters when it comes to mental health, and specifically for women veterans. A lot of ladies have come from really, really rough childhoods, and a lot of things are in there. So when we get a lady veteran who comes in for therapy, we are looking at early childhood development. We're looking at relationships. How did their parents interact or didn't? We're looking at a lot of these things that truly impact our lady veterans. And then this is also one of those pieces that contributes to the high suicide risk. It contributes to domestic violence. Both lady veterans have been known to be also the perpetrator and the victims of domestic violence. So just kind of some of those, and SUD issues. So these all complex and compound. So it's really it's a whole person approach when we look at mental health. So here's the military sexual trauma piece of it. And this is from 2018. And again, with the numbers, they're generally always underreported. And you know, they're high anyway. So when you look at the underreporting of it, it really is, it sucks. And I heard in the previous with Vanessa Guillen, all of those things coming along. I think the awareness and the understanding to do something different is really coming along. And I really hope it keeps traction because something's got to change. Up here in Boise, since I've been the director, this is just an interesting, from Walking My Combat Boots, excellent book. I'm really glad they touched on the MST, but going back to as a director, we had over a 50% increase of MST referrals coming in for therapy. So it's still happening, they're still coming in, but I'm proud that they're coming into the vet center, which is really the idea, and that they're starting to get care. And so I really, the awareness and the Me Too movement, I think has been really impactful, and that impacts mental health for women veterans. It all rolls together. So I'm really, that's exciting. I already kind of briefly touched on this, but the bias, stereotypes and stigmas, this really matters for women veterans and with mental health. So I can't tell you how many lady veterans have come in and they're just pissed because their husband got thanked at Home Depot and they didn't get thanked, or there was an assumption that they're not a veteran. And one of the things I do as a counselor, I said, well, this is a perfect education piece, right? Don't get crazy, don't get pissy with them. But you know, I was a veteran too, and I did the things. And that's just, for me, an education piece. Teach the world that we're all part of this. So, and talk to our partners about it as well. Like, hey, help me out, back me up if this is a thing. I think that's really important. And then I know as a female Marine, and this is one of the things that I had to work through in my own therapy, and I'm sure it's similar with other branches, I've heard it a lot, but being a female Marine, there's a lot of trying to measure up to the male Marines, and that really impacts you over a lifetime. And that's one of the things we work on in mental health is you are enough regardless of what Marines said. Like they have a very significant impact because we're young and impressionable and we're always fighting. But part of mental health is breaking those down and knowing that we're good enough. And that's where these stereotypes come from, and the biases and the stigma. I mean, I still get nervous when I walk into I walked into an auditorium full of veteran service officers. There's like half of them were Marines, and I was like, oh, they've already got jokes. So like, and that's my own shit that I have to work out too. But reality, they still have jokes, right? So knowing those stereotypes, working against them, really important when it comes to mental health, especially as us who are helping folks get into care or getting into services. We need to watch our own as well. Shame is huge with this. And this goes for both men and women. Folks coming out of the military, there's a lot of this, and I've noticed it more with my lady veterans. Just that they didn't, kind of goes back to the female Marine thing, that they didn't quite do enough, or they got out and they didn't feel it was the right way to get out. And then getting out and not knowing what to do, just holding that shame. And this goes into, hopefully the next slide, yes, betrayal. One of the things I've noticed the most with our women veterans is that they are carrying a heavy load of betrayal. A lot of, and granted, this is not all or nothing, a lot of what I was before with the early childhood stuff. They're going into the military to escape something, or they're going into the military that's supposed to protect them and make them better. And then something happens in the military that reinforces that belief system about themselves. So that betrayal is a really constant for our lady veterans. And there is quite a bit for male veterans as well, but I've noticed it the most with our ladies. And really working through that is hard for them. So, and this will lead into the next part about how do we balance that unique needs of our women veterans. And it's really the best thing I could say is meet them where they are, regardless of your job. If you're working with veterans, meet them where they are and let them lead. We get to be the bumpers, because that's what they're looking for. They want somebody to believe in them, to not do the things that have already happened. So don't add any more to the things. And really adding that safe place to fall is, oh my gosh, so important. And being consistent, holy cannoli. And so before I talked a lot about the whole person approach, and that's meeting them where they are. There's so many things that can contribute. And with our women veterans, like our male veterans, there are so many pieces and parts of mental health that are combination and collaborating and working in their brain that, and that's kind of why I struggle with any like 10 to 12 sessions. We're going to work on this and we're going to get things done. Like, oh gosh, there's so much more. And our lady veterans, they have a lot that's going on, and it really could be marriage. It could be all of the things. So this is kind of the whole person approach, some questions. I'm trucking. The professional balance, I think, is huge. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying is, do we present ourselves? Are we safe? Are we allowing the veteran to have a choice in their care and where they're going? Got there. So, and it kind of goes into kind of summing it up. Everybody's got a story and it's very impactful for them. And mental health, I mean, it's encompassing, it's all of the things. So I love my job and I love what we do and I love what you guys are doing. And and on these slides, I've got a ton of resources, so I can send these out or however you want them, but there's a ton of articles, a lot of education pieces. And women veterans are amazing with all of our unique circumstances, and just meet us where we are and we'll be happy. Thank you guys. And I will
Christina, thank you so much. That was so amazing. And here's what makes me most excited about your presentation is that you had the one slide that talked about the percentages, the women's issues, the health issues. One of the things I've been finding, because I lead a group called the Silver Veteran for female veterans over the age of 50, is how chronically misdiagnosed women's health issues are, right? Women are more likely to die in the hospital, 3 times more likely to die in the hospital over men because we're misdiagnosed. Women who have immuno diseases have to see 5 doctors, right? 5 doctors, an average of 4.3 over 4.3 years, where a man who is less likely, right? Almost all the immunodeficiency diseases happen within women, but the few men that they're diagnosed right off the bat, right? Like within like the first 2 years. Suicide rates, trying to find the underlying suicide rate indicators with women over men are almost impossible. It seems like the VA has the corner on that. And so if you're not VA, I'm not VA, I can't find it. But we know that men and women are built differently. Their health is different. Their mental health is different. It would just make sense that their mental health and indicators and stressors would also be different. So thank you so much for pointing that out. I think that's ignored. I think nobody realizes, because nobody wants to realize the cruelty that women's health is 200 years on average, like about 200 years behind men's health. And so they try to group us. It's like it's a uniform. Well, just wear the uniform. Well, no, y'all are like this and like this. We're like this. We're like this. We're like, it's just different. And so thank you so much for pointing that out, because I think a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah, one of the things I'm doing a little bit of research right now is just the hormonal difference, the chemical difference of women and men, right? And there's been, and I think that's where the borderline comes in too. They're like, well, she's hormonal, she's dramatic, she's borderline. When we have fluctuations, we're women, we're allowed to, like we're going to. And then what does that look like on mental health, specifically for women veterans? But it's not because I'm bitchy or it's my time of the month. Like there's other shit going on too. Don't just put me in this box. Sorry, you guys. I'm getting better at not cussing.
No, and it's also that there was a Everybody Loves Raymond episode where the dad and Raymond were like, just calm down, I got you this. And it was like Midol PMS. And it's like, first of all, don't tell me to flip and calm down and then expect me not to get mad, A, and then, and so and they just went on this whole rant, and it was just really, really entertaining, but underlying true facts, right?
Facts.
So, yeah, so thank you so much for that. Okay, CD has a question. Yes, CD.
Yes, can you send that presentation to the group, I guess? Or
Is it
put it in the
possible,
chat?
Christina? You can actually upload it in the chat, Christina.
Oh yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
All right. So if no one else has any questions, I'd like to bring, oh, yes, Julie. Hi.
Hi, I don't have a question, but more of a statement. As I was listening to the presentation, first of all, thank you for joining us today. One of the things I love about getting on the collaborative call is the women veterans. You know, I enjoy talking to all veterans, but you know, women veterans is at the heart. And my mom served 20 plus years in the Marines. My sister also served as a Air Force veteran. So I'm not the only one in the family that feels certain ways about it. I used to feel upset if I thought someone was going to approach me and have to validate my status. But one thing I've learned, and actually what I appreciate about working with VPN, is I've changed the narrative. Instead of being annoyed at someone questioning my status, it's like, oh yeah, actually I am an Air Force veteran. What branch were you in? And then I get to use that to help connect to them, either just in the community or providing them support. So before I worked for VPN, it was more just, you know, yes, I'm a veteran. Yes, I have this. Yes, I have that. Like, what else do you want from me? But now it's more so using it to connect versus using it to have to validate yourself. Because in the end, once you have that connection, they're like, thank you for talking to me. And it becomes more of a gratitude and less of a, you know, let's butt heads about stuff that we both have a misjudgment about. Because I know I've judged people, you know, that I might not believe as a veteran if they don't provide me that, like the facts that I'm looking for, you know, the stolen valor kind of thing. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
I love that because it changed the narrative. It teaches that awareness and education versus being angry, and that doesn't help. We need to build our case versus work against it. I love that. It's amazing.
It's all fine and dandy until you're fighting for the last parking spot at Lowe's that says veteran, and you're like, what? You know? And then you take the girl out the hood, can't take the hood out the girl. I try, it's difficult, but I digress. So thank you so much. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Mr. Jim Zenner. Mr. Jim Zenner is the mental health program manager with the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. He is a clinical, that is his title, Clinical Program Manager 3. He's currently overseeing 2 whole person care programs aimed at reducing psychiatric hospitalizations of high-risk individuals and development of veteran peer access network, aimed at creating greater access to resources through sector collaboration and partnership with the VA and community providers. Mr. Zenner, please take it away.
Hey, thanks, Rocio. Thanks, Krishna, for inviting me here. You know, first things first, obviously, I'm not a woman. I am a veteran. But I'm going to be speaking, particularly, I know, surprise, Rocio. But I'm going to be speaking from the lens of an administrator, somebody who administrates large mental health programs and kind of what, you know, how, you know, I think other administrators need to consider women veteran issues specifically to access. So, you know, really, you know, most of my education about women veterans came from women veterans. I've done a lot of listening over the years. I'm no expert, but I know enough that women veteran issues are different than men. You know, from the dating scene, I remember talking to many women veterans about, you know, what it's like to date. You know, military guys are a little bit too, you know, a-hole-ish, and then, you know, the civilian guys might be a little bit too soft, you know, just things like that. I was like, I never would have thought of that. But just really kind of learning a lot. And you know, with that, you know, developing a program like the Peer Access Network. It is a network of 70 peers across Los Angeles County. Shout out to Julie, and I see Angela on there. Perfect example, and it'll kind of segue in. But as we were standing up this team, you know, I thought a lot about some advocacy that LA got on board with around the Peer Act of 2018. The Peer Act of 2018 was a act that identified, or I don't know what the proper word is, authorized or mandated the VA to create 50 pilot sites to put peers in primary care and rural areas. But it also stated that anywhere that women veterans get help, there needed to be a women veteran peer available to receive those women. And so that's something that really stuck out in my mind as I, you know, was building this program with our steering committee and board offices, is really that every place that women veteran can go throughout the county, we need to make sure that we have women veterans there to receive them if they prefer. You know, and really kind of probably the biggest thing that happened to me when I used to do a lot of work on the ground is, I remember at Orange County, we were doing a fair, and how it had a resource fair, and how we had it set up. Peers, we would be assigned to every veteran walking in, and we would walk with them around, get them connected to VA healthcare, dental, housing, whatever it was. And I remember this woman veteran, she looked at me and she was like, "Do I have to work with you?" I was like, "Actually, you know, you don't. Let me go get my Marine Corps friend, Krishna Flores, and she'll help you out." But you know, that just was like, what if I would have said no? Like, yeah, you know, I'm the one that assigned. Or what happened if there was no Krishna Flores available to walk her around? She would have been out of the system. And so that's something that really, I think, as administrators, especially when we're looking at access, that was emphasized in the earlier presentation. You have to have women veterans there to help women veterans, period. We set a goal for ourselves in the program to have 40% women veterans across VPN. I think we came in around 38%. But every site that we have, every team has women veterans across the county in each supervisor district team. Yeah, I mean, just to really, Christina's presentation, your presentation earlier was really, really good. I mean, just it hit on a lot of spots that I actually got to experience while working alongside women veterans. You know, I remember working with a gal named Alex. She spent some time in Iraq, spent some time in Kuwait. And I remember I introduced her to, I can't remember who it was. It was an outside provider that came in to provide help to our veterans in our program. And I said, "Oh yeah, meet Alex. She's a fellow combat vet." And she like pulled me aside later. And she's like, "I'm not a combat vet." I was like, "You were in Iraq. Like, you're a combat vet." She's like, "No, I'm not. Like, I was just there." And I was like, wow, that's so weird. Because men would never say that. I've never ran into a man that said, "Oh yeah, no, I'm not a combat vet. I was just in Iraq," you know, like never. So it's like those instances where it's like, we really got to make sure that people understand how to ask the right questions. And we have to make sure that we have women veterans in every place women veterans will go to get help. I got to say, you know, the advocacy group here in LA you guys got a fierce game, seriously. So I really haven't, as an administrator in LA, as when I'm talking to the VA, as they're standing up their veteran and mental evaluation team, I didn't even have to mention, "Hey, you guys have to have women veterans on your team." They already said, "We're going to pair a male VAPD with a female clinician, or a female VAPD with a male clinician." So that way so the VA was already forethinking on that. I engaged with the LA County Sheriffs, which I'm going to go up and meet with up in Soup District 5 later. And they already were saying, "We're trying to recruit a female deputy because we understand." So it's just, you know, in LA, I haven't seen a problem as an administrator of people being mindful of like, "Hey, we got to have women veterans anywhere we serve women veterans." But I'm not sure outside of LA. I live and breathe LA. But if there's anybody that not Dodger, no, I'm not a Dodger fan. Let's not go that far.
I'm an LA fan.
You guys are all right though if you're a Dodger fan. But but you know, I don't know if anybody else, you know, is from any other part, but that's something as you're kind of, you know, participate in stakeholder groups and stuff like that. I would say, you know, make sure that you're helping and, you know, carry that message forward, you know, to make sure that, you know, we're putting women in leadership positions, putting women veterans on our steering committee advisory group meetings. You know, for the Department of Mental Health, we have to do a lot of stakeholder engagement as prescribed by state regulations, and you know, all that kind of stuff. You got to make sure that you have the right, you know, you got to have veteran presence on those type of meetings to help inform, because as you know, I got some experience working alongside women veterans, and they, you know, I've learned things here and there, but I can't advise it as a woman. There's things I'm going to miss. Like you know, learned a lot about women's health, you know, as you were talking, Rocio. And so, you know, I just think it's very important that we include women veterans anywhere we're making decisions, or, you know, really kind of mulling over, you know, developing a program that helps women veterans. There's a saying in the peer support world, nothing about us without us. And, you know, I really apply that to women veterans when thinking about the program development. There's really, I know I don't have any PowerPoint. I just wanted to come in and speak from the perspective of an administrator, somebody who creates programs. I don't know if the last part is Q&A, or if there's anything that I need to touch on, Rocio or Krishna, or.
Yes. So here's one of the things that I wanted to ask you. And I think that, you know, we've already touched on this a little bit, but I really want to make sure we hit this a little bit harder. You are, and I'm not being facetious. I know you and I joke a lot, but I'm being very honest when I tell you this, is that you have a big influence on the things that go on in the veteran community, right? So that's number one. Number two, so in a way, and it's, you know, you yield a lot of power, a lot of influence. Your say means something because of your experience, but also because of your position. How do you know when it's time to implement something? How do you know when something's an issue? And we, you know, the female veterans, or maybe LGBTQ or disabled veterans, you know, they're not being, you know, something needs to be done. Equity needs to be equitable. Laws or rules or guidelines need to be implemented.
Yeah, I think that's part of the hope of where we're taking the LA Veteran Collaborative, you know, with Amy, like really, and Tess on the access and engagement, really making that a place to where, you know, women veterans, male veterans, older veterans, LGBT, trans veterans are able to go and talk about their perspective. Not just, you know, not just their own perspective, but helping, especially the ones that are helping others. Like we want like the system navigators to say, hey, like I took my, you know, two of my veterans to the VA or to DMH or wherever, and there was no specialty considerations for LGBT. They didn't even get asked the question in the intake, you know, things like that, to bring that information back, bring that to us, our awareness and access engagement, and then really take a look at that information, disseminate it out to the community so that we're all aware of it. And then getting the intel for peers and the intel for influencers out to, you know, people like Dr. Braverman, who is the medical director at the local VAMC, getting it out to our health deputies at the county level who make decisions on DMH or work with the department to make decisions around how DMH operates and spends funds. Get it to the people that, you know, make the decisions. In a case of like where maybe we were not. So one thing that we're tackling at DMH right now is asking a veteran status mandatory. And so, you know, if I hear something like that from the group or from the community, I take that back to our clinical informatics team and leadership team and let them know, like, hey, we can't even track veteran status. And so that's something that I've been working on inside the department. But if I don't hear from the group, and I really notice that there's not so much on the women's side, but on the men's side, like, and the rest of the collaborative, there's kind of a hesitation to be vocal. Like you guys reached out to me about the status at 257, the 20 beds that are coming up in the end of the month. I really appreciate that. I love taking that to the VA and saying, hey, could we get a status update? If there's something wrong with Department of Mental Health, I'd love to take that back to the Department of Mental Health and get an answer for you all as well. I just wish more groups did that. And I think we're working towards it. because there's kind of like this, at least I'm putting myself back in my, the shoes when I first started in 2010, 2011, doing this stuff. There's like a hesitation because I don't really know how everything works. So I'm kind of hesitant to kind of put myself out there. I don't want to create waves because I might like have to reach out, to, the individual in the group to get a veteran some help. But I'm hoping what we can do with LAVC, with women vets leading the way, is really kind of create this atmosphere of like, hey, it's okay to talk about barriers. It's not personal. Like we're all here at the end of the day to help veterans. And, saying, pointing out that something's not working is okay and expected.
And I think as a woman veteran, I've been around for a minute, Jim. I started off when you were the program manager at Volunteers of America. And I really appreciate you talking about access to care, because I encounter many women veterans that don't have the same access or experience as I did. I've had good and bad, but I continue to meet women that just have bad experiences with the VA, and the VA is really failing in supporting their rehabilitation after combat and coupled with MST. So, and also as far as access, the VA is also not covering prescriptions for women veterans that are costly or aren't traditionally covered. And in the lack of supporting and rendering that medication, sometimes it leads the woman veteran to have to remove a reproductive organ because the VA doesn't want to pay a premium price for the one effective medication on the market. So when I hear things like that, I get really upset, but I'm glad that we have the space here with the collaborative and also the leadership. This is the first time, not the first time, but I see so many women in leadership now, vocalizing our issues and mobilizing together. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And I just want to share with you that we'll be bringing up those issues with healthcare coverage and equitable access to care.
Awesome. Yeah, I look forward to it. Yeah, Amy and I both sit on the CVEB, which has direct access to VA. And then I sit on the Community Veteran Outreach and Engagement Board that reports or sends recommendations to the Secretary of the VA. So both those avenues, we will push those, and my recommendation and what we're trying to move towards is to have our working groups put together like a list or a letter actually from the LA Veteran Collaborative to the VA that we can take and we could say, hey, this is a unified voice coming from the LA Veteran Collaborative, which is, over 350 organizations with a powerful women veteran presence. And these are the issues that we are seeing as a community versus like, Jim Zenner sending a, 3 or 4 kind of bullet points.
Well,
if it's coming from you guys and it's coming from the LAVC,
I'm just really surprised with the Deborah Sampson Act being passed about 2 years ago. Not much has been done as far as implementing and expanding access to women's health care or improvement. So I look forward to helping draft that up.
Awesome.
Yeah, and Jim, I just want to say this again, all joking set aside, I'm so thankful that I can bring up issues. We can come together and say, hey, we should tell Jim, that's a thing. Like, we can tell Jim Zenner, let's ask him. Let's see what Jim Zenner says. I don't think I've always had access like that to someone in a leadership position that I can say, you know what, this is some bull crap, like what's going on with this. And you don't take it like in a personal attack on who you are, but instead on there's a situation that needs to be rectified. Leadership starts at the top. So setting those examples, I think, makes it more digestible, right? Because then others will see and say, hey, you know what? Maybe it's not that she's having a bad PMS day. Maybe there's some truth to the complaint that she's expressing, right?
Yeah.
So that's always appreciative. So you can put that in your little file so that when somebody says something, you'd be like, well, here's what some veterans said. Let me show you this card.
That's right. That's exactly what I do. Trust me. Oh yeah, everything's doing great. Our women veteran clinic is wonderful. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, this is what I'm hearing. So yeah,
Yeah,
no, I appreciate you guys, having the intestinal fortitude to speak up, because I mentioned a couple of the reasons why some of us veterans in the community don't speak up. But if we don't speak up, nothing's going to change.
absolutely. Paul Schneeber has a question. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, we discuss mostly veteran issues here, specifically women veterans. How close to the line of active duty issues do you get in terms of getting the DD 214? You're a veteran, now you have all these issues. Is there any sort of intervention prior to discharge that the group is involved with?
Paul, what I believe you're asking is, is there a method of being proactive to accessing some of the things, right, that we're dealing with before we come off of active duty? And so I know that ETS is doing, they're trying really hard, right? They have volunteers, they do these trainings in order to be prepared, to be prepared to help someone out once they come out. Now, I know that I read an article, I think I saw it in social media, so it must be true, that they were going to start processing these claims or starting claims before someone's processed out. So I don't know how much truth it is, or, it's the VA. It's like, if the Titanic would have been able to move faster, it would have avoided the iceberg, right? Like, that's how big this VA ship is to try to move. So I don't know how long that's going to take into, to come to fruition, but I know that it's a talk. It's like, why wait, till you're already out and suffering? Let's see what we can do as much as we can proactively, but that's a big ship to do. So we depend on these smaller organizations, these groups like the ETS, to try to help with that processing out. That's the best answer I have. Does anybody else have an answer to that?
Yeah, I do, but I see Claudia and Angela have their hands raised. Rocio, I'll start talking about this like crazy if you get me talking about it.
All right.
We're fired up. We're fired up in the county to get out in front of this transition thing. And if I got time, I'll talk about it at the end.
Claudia, please. You had your hand up.
Yes, I have to leave in a little bit because I have another meeting, but I just wanted to thank you personally, Rocio, because you sent me to Women Vets on Point, and I already got a caseworker working. I already emailed her and all that. So thank you so much. I gotta go now.
Up in here. Thank you, Claudia, for that. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. And for the transition, CalTAP, I believe they have a lot of webinars that I've gone to also that helps with when you transition out of the military. So thank you, and bye-bye. Thanks to everyone.
Bye, Claudia. Thank you for coming. Angela Rose.
Hi, everyone. So I'm still I'm in the reserves, but what we're doing here at our office, Louis, he just is going to be part of the CalTAPS program or something along those lines, doing the transitioning virtually. I myself work very closely with all the soldiers in my unit. I'm, pushing it on my leadership to be more active in getting our soldiers their transitioning programs implemented within the units. I've actually spoke with lots of the higher leadership within the community. They're everywhere from California, outside states, and they have lots of questions, and they make sure that all of the soldiers are aware of our program of VPAN, that we can assist them in their transitions.
Thank you, Angela. All right, Jim.
All right. Well, yeah. Sorry for the rant that's about to happen. So we're trying to do as much as we can with the county as quick as we can. So what we have right now is it's almost to the Board of Supervisors, but a letter requesting our ability as a county to bring, if you're familiar with SkillBridge, Paul, it's basically where as you're transitioning out of the military, if your chain of command signs off on it, you can go work out in the community up to 6 months before your exit date. And the DoD pays for you. You don't wear your uniform. You just show up like this to, your DMH site or whatever. But that would be available to service members in all 36 of our departments. So if they don't want to work at Department of Mental Health and get up all in their feelings like we love to do over here at Mental Health, there's Parks and Rec. There's, the tax collector, bureau, if you're kind of more of a numbers person. But there's a lot of opportunities here in the county. And so Skill Bridge is the first step. The second step is really entering into an MOU with the Department of Labor back in DC. So they have 58 navigators that are working on 18 different installations. It's a pilot program, and they're extremely interested in partnering with us. And so those 58 employees, once we have Skill Bridge up, they would be able to sell LA County to these men and women getting out of the military to go intern with us up to 6 months. And we've developed a plan to where, they would have to go to a board of supervisor meeting to get to understand local government. They would get to interview, 3 department directors to get an overview of what it's like to administer a large county department. Just get them inundated into local government, because we think it's a really good place for veterans, transitioning service members to land after they serve. And then the next piece, the last piece, is really working with finding an organization that does translation of skill. So in the county, we got like a $39 billion budget almost, and we have like thousands of different job specs. And so translating military experience into each of those job specs is going to be a huge burden for our HR. So right now we're looking for different applications like Indeed and stuff like that, where you can upload your information and it directly translates. We're looking at programs to make it easier on our Department of Human Resources so that that can happen. But yeah, just really exciting stuff. I mean, our director is fired up about getting in front of the transition. Whenever he talks to the community always says what are we doing to get out in front of the transition? A lot of our peers have volunteered for the ETS program that Rocio mentioned, because most of us want to make sure that others didn't have it as bad as we had it in our transition. And quite honestly, the data that led to the Prevents Act, $8 billion allocation a few years ago, was because that first year of transition, we're losing way too many of our service members or veterans at the time to suicide. So that's kind of my spiel. Hopefully, yeah, I didn't go over time.
So what prompted my question, I've been working on a case at Fort Hood with a soldier that was being court-martialed for no reason. During the course of this year, she was, talking about suicide the entire time. Just in the last 3 days, it looks like the case has been resolved. The Gomer that they were going to put on her has been ripped up, and she's going to be able to get out. But the mental health issues that she's faced during the last year and all the stress, she's going to become a veteran soon, and it's all going to end up on your doorstep. So we're just trying to figure out, is there a way to sort of, get some of these services ahead rather than just a job?
Yeah, one other piece that I forgot in my rant was that, so the Veteran Experience Office sends data to every single state. Most states send it out to their counties, like the DD-214s of everybody that transitions out the month prior. We're working kind of through some of those issues now within the county family to be able to get a hold of those DD-214s that have contact information and start reaching out to those veterans once they come back to LA. So it's not quite getting them while they're still in, like the ETS, but at least like doing some initial outreach and stuff in partnership with the CalTAPS program, which is great, just like a great information blast. But here in LA, we got VPN, and we can offer, like connection with somebody who's made the transition themselves to kind of be their navigator. So yeah, that's the last piece and the end of the rant. But yeah, we're really focused on this. And oh, never mind, another piece. We're hiring a psychologist. So in the situation of your woman veteran that you just mentioned, we're hiring a psychologist at DMH to work with the Veteran Justice Outreach Program, to work with Jody's program, CVJP. Our Department of Military Veteran Affairs is going to be hiring a Justice Outreach VSO. And so we're working on, so folks that are really kind of crashing and burning in their transition, or maybe they never sought help, and all of a sudden they wake up in a jail cell. Or we just find out they're arrested before they go to jail or before they're arraigned. CVJP can start, working with them and providing support. We're really kind of focused here in LA on providing support for justice involved veterans, and hopefully we can provide some support to transitioning service members. Knowing Jody, she wouldn't shy away from something like that. So.
And I would like to share with you, Paul, there's also another resource, the Vet Center program. It's a national program. It runs across all of the United States. We have 300 clinics. And we also provide active duty service member veterans and their families, reservists, National Guard, Coasties. We provide them with readjustment counseling services. And if they experience military sexual trauma, we can definitely support them with that as well before they even get out. So if you have if you know an active duty woman who is struggling with the experience of military sexual trauma, she doesn't trust anyone and wants to talk to someone, the Vet Center is a confidential ally for that particular veteran, and she's more than welcome to access our services at no cost. And also, sorry, I meant to say active duty person.
Oh, okay. Does this include Texas?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, we have clinics in Guam, Alaska, Virgin Islands, Hawaii. Please reach out. I'll put my contact information for you there, sir. More than happy to assist anyone throughout the United States. I've done that before, where I link up veterans across the country with the nearest vet center to them for support.
James, I'll call you this week about some other stuff.
Sounds good, Paul. That was the end of my rant for sure, Rocio.
Okay, I was like, okay, does he have anything else
I wasn't
to
building
say?
up or anything. Yeah.
Should I, what should I do? Like, I don't know. I don't want to interfere with your, but we don't have to. I was gonna say, I don't want to interfere with your, like, your mind, like, as you're going on and on, but it is 12 o'clock. So, with that, we will be concluding our, workout, or our working group. Sorry. That's on my way to the gym right now, as a matter of fact. I'm going to tear off these pearls and just go. So just thank you, everyone, for joining. I just want to give out a special shout out to our men for being so woke and so sensitive and wanting to support our female veterans. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our wonderful guest, Christina, and our other wonderful guest, Mr. Jim Zenner, Jay-Z, the Zen, whatever, he goes by all those. And just thank you for just joining us here today. Thank you so much. I'm going to stay on for a little bit longer. I'm going to conclude the recording. So whatever you say to me or want to say to me, it's not on record. And in case you want to ask some more questions, some stuff, no?